Now let's see about fifth unit of advanced Java programming. And this is servlet. Uh, Servlet. This unit contains a background of the servlet, the life cycle of the servlet, and a JSDK, a simple servlet, the servlet API, a role play servlet concept, the Java X.servlet package, reading servlet parameter, the Java X servlet.http package, handling HTTP request and response using cookies, session tracking. This is the this unit. Now let's see it one by one. Servlets, background of a servlet. Servlet can do more than simply persist between access. They can also execute between access. Any thread started by a servlet can continue executing even after the response has been sent. This ability proves most useful for long-running tasks whose incremental results should be made available to multiple clients. A background thread starter in init performs continuous work while requirement request handling threads display the current status with do get. It is similar technique to that used in animation applet where one thread changes the picture and another paints the display. Servlet technology has emerged as a powerful way to extend web server functionality through dynamic HTML pages. A servlet is a Java program that runs in a web server. The servlet takes on HTTP request from a browser, generates dynamic content, and provides an HTTP response back to the browsers. Servlet technology, in addition to improve scalability, offers the well-known Java advantages of object orientation, platform independence, security, and robustness. Servlet can use all standard Java APIs, including the JDBC API. Uh, the web server or data server in which a servlet is running is one on the same side of the network firewall as the data being accessed. An applet running on a client machine outside the firewall requires special measures to allow the applet to access any server other than any server other than one from which it was downloaded. For Java Servlet, by definition, implements the standard JavaX.servlet servlet interface. This interface specifies methods to initialize a servlet, process request, get the configuration and other basic information of a servlet, and terminate a servlet instance. For web application, we can implement the servlet interface by extending the standard Java x.servlet.http.http servlet abstract class. The HTTP servlet class include some methods init, destroy, do get, do post, do put, do delete, and service method, and get servlet info. A servlet class that subclass HTTP servlet must implement some of the some of these method. அப்ப காசு அதுப்பா. This method as appropriate. Each method takes as input a standard Java x.servlet.http servlet request instance and a standard Java x.servlet.http servlet response instance. The HTTP servlet request instance provides information to the servlet regarding to the HTTP request, such as request parameter names and values, the name of the remote host that made the request and the name of the server that received the request. Next one, servlet container. Servlet containers sometimes are referred to as servlet engine, execute and manage servlets. A servlet container is usually written in Java and is either part of a web server or otherwise associated with and used by a web server. When a servlet is called on the web server passes the HTTP request to the servlet container. The container in turns passes the request to the servlet. In the course of managing a servlet, a simple container performs the some rules. It creates an instance of a servlet and call its init method to initialize it. It calls the service method of the servlet. It calls the destroy method of the servlet to discard it when appropriate so that it can be garbage collected. In a multiple thread model, the container can make multiple simultaneous service calls to a single servlet instance using a separate thread for each call, but the servlet developer is responsible for managing synchronizations. Next thing, life cycle of servlet. The web container maintain the life cycle of a servlet instance. Let's see the life cycle of the servlet. First one, servlet class is loaded, servlet instance is created, init method is invoked, service method is invoked, destroy method is invoked. Is the dynamic representation of a life cycle of servlet. Load servlet class, create servlet instance, call the init method and call the service method. This is the ready to state and call the destroy method. After invoking the init method, servlet comes in the ready state. In the ready state, servlet performs all the tasks. When the web container invokes the destroy method, it shifts to the end state. First one, servlet class is loaded. The class loader is responsible to load the servlet class. The servlet class is loaded when the first request for the servlet is received by the web container. Second one, servlet instance is created. The web container creates the instance of a servlet after loading the servlet class. The servlet instance is created only once in the servlet life cycles. Next one, init method is invoked. The web container calls the init method only once after creating the servlet instance. The init method is used to initialize the servlet. It is the lifecycle method of the javax.servlet.servlet interface. Next one, service method is invoked. The web container calls the service method each time when the request for the servlet is received. If servlet is not initialized, if follow the first three steps as described above, then call the service method. If servlet is initialized, it calls the service method. Notice that the servlet is initialized only once. Next one, destroy method is invoked. The web container calls the destroy method before removing the servlet instance from the service. It gives the servlet an opportunity to clean up any resource, for example, memory, thread, etc. Next one, JSDK. JSDK is the Java Servlet Developers Kit. This is an add-on to regular JDK. The JSDK has the additional files needed in order to compile Java Servlet. The latest version of the JSDK version 2.0 included in the JSDK is a Java Servlet Runner program. The servlet runner is a program that runs on our workstations and allows me to test servlet we have written without running a web server. Other files included are the servlet Java, servlet example, are the jar.java and the dot class files for testing purpose and to help we understand how the Java code is implemented. Installing JDK. Let me preface the JSDK license process procedure by saying that the JDK is an add-on onto the JDK. Next thing, a simple servlet. A required software to develop Java servlet program, JDK 1.8 or later, Tomcats or class space server, web browser, or any text editor or NetBeans tools. Let us see the procedure to develop a Java web application have servlet components as the dynamic web container component. To learn the basic of servlet, we will develop this example manually without using any IDE. After a few examples, we will use Eclipse IDE or develop servlet based web application or NetBeans IDE. Create and deployment directory structures. Step 1. Create a deployment directory or staging directory structure for Java web application. In the servlet introduction topic, we have already learned about the development directory structure of a Java web application. Based on the knowledge created development deployment structure in this Java servlet program, we won't take any static resources. Next, development servlet component. Develop the servlet component data servlet.java. The servlet container accepts the dot class, not the dot Java file. Therefore, we must compile it and create the dot class file. So add Tomcat hook, lib servlet API.jar file to the class path. Compile the servlet component data servlet.java. Generate the dot class file in package to compile open CMD from the current working directory where data servlet.java is available. Develop the servlet configuration files. Develop the deployment descriptor that is web.xml. Develop web.xml file to configure servlet component and to map servlet component with URL. Note that XML is case sensitive and strictly typed. Let's test the servlet web applications. Deploy the web applications. Copy the deployment Java servlet web application to Tomcat home web apps folder. Start Tomcat server. To start Tomcat server, double click on the Tomcat server /bin Tomcat 10 or using the NetBeans IDE, the infield of class with servers that automatically run the files that automatically servers are running and compile the program and open the target web browsers. Next, servlet configuration file. Servlet configuration means giving the class name and the package name of the servlet component to servlet configure container to recognize a given class as servlet component. Servlet mapping means linking certain request URL with the servlet components, asking a servlet container to allow the request to private area servlet component for specified request URL. This are not. Let's see about now this example. This is the sample program of a servlet. Import Java x dot servlet dot http dot star. Import Java x dot servlet dot star. Import Java dot io dot star. Here public class demo servlet is a class name extends HTTP servlet. The two methods important do get method now public void do get HTTP servlet is a class. REQ request object, achieve solid response is RE is object, through solid exception, IO exception. RE is a response object dot set content type text of HTML pages. Now, PW is a print writer class. Print writer PW is equal to res dot get writer. So PW is a object on the print writer class. Now PW dot println, PW dot println services, and PW dot close. This is a simple program. Just now from the welcome to servlet. This time just only print. We using the this is a simple program of servlet program. Next thing servlet API. Java Servlet API consists of two packages. Java Servlet, Java X.Servlet.html. Java X.Servlet package contains all the class and the interface which can be used to write protocol independent servlet. Java X.Servlet.http contains all the class and interface which are necessary to write HTTP specific servlet. First, Java X.Servlet packages. Interface, servlet config, servlet context, and servlet request, servlet response, request dispatcher, filter. Filter chain, filter config, servlet request, dot listener, servlet request attribute listener, servlet context listener, servlet context attribute listener, sum of lister. Next class. Class name is a generic servlet, servlet request wrapper, servlet response wrapper, servlet input stream, servlet output stream. Next, next thing, Java X dot servlet dot HTTP packages. Interface is like a HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response, HTTP sessions, HTTP session listener, HTTP session attribute listener, HTTP session binding listener, HTTP session activation listener. Next class, cookie, HTTP servlet, HTTP servlet request wrapper, HTTP servlet response wrapper, HTTP session binding event. Next, we will move to servlet concept. And servlet is a Java programming language class that is used to extend the capabilities of server that host application access by means of a request response programming model. Now, servlet concept. A servlet is a Java programming language class that is used to extend the capabilities of server that host applications accessed by means of a request response programming model. Although servlet can respond to any type of request, they are commonly used to extend the application as hosted by web servers. For such application, Java Servlet technology defines HTTP specific servlet class. The Java X.Servlet and Java X.Servlet HTTP packages provide interface and a class for writing servlets. All servlet must implement the servlet interface, which define lifecycle method. Servlet technology is used to create web applications. Servlet technology uses Java language to create web applications. Web applications are helper applications that resides at a web server and build dynamic web pages. A dynamic web page could be anything. A web application or helper application that resides at a web server and build dynamic web pages. A dynamic web page could be anything like a page that randomly choose picture to display or even page that display the current time. Now let's see the diagram. is the how to flow the data from client to server or server. First, web browsers, the request sent to the web server, the communicate through servlet. The response through reward process. This is the how to flow the data from client to servlet. This is the diagrammatic representations. A servlet technology uses Java. Web applications made using servlets are secure, scalable, and robust. A CGI. CGI is a common gateway interface. Uh, Before servlet, CGI programming was used to create web applications. Here, how a CGI program works. User clicks a link that has URL dynamic pages instead of a static page. The URL decides which CGI programs to execute. Web servers run the CGI program in separate OS shell. The shell include OS environment and the process to execute code of the CGI program. The CGI response is sent back to the web server, which wraps the response in an HTTP response and send it back to the web browsers. Next thing, advantage of servlet. Less response time because each request runs in separate thread. Servlets are scalable, robust, and object-oriented. Servlets are platform independent. This is the servlet concept. Next thing, Java servlet architecture. We can also consider the software architecture of a servlet as the life cycle of the servlet. To write a servlet, the user needs first to implement the servlet interface directly or indirectly using the following input packages. Next thing, reading servlet parameters. Reading servlet parameters. The servlet request class include methods that allow me to read the names, values of parameter that are included in a client request. We will develop a servlet that illustrate their uses. The HTML source code for post parameters. HTML is shown the listening. It defines a table that contains two labels, two text field, one of the labels in the source code. Start the servlet runner and display the web page in browser. Enter an employee name and phone number. Some examples. Submit the web pages. Next thing, handling HTTP request and the response. Do get and do post are the commonly used methods of HTTP servlet. Do get its main jobs is to get some resource from server based on client request. Total number of character that get can carry to servlet is very less or limited. This appends URL with the client request data. One can catch the request of this type. Request parameters remain in browsing history. Because of the above limitations, GET is not supposed to use for complex and sensitive requests. Next one, post method. Its main job is to send client data and get the resource from server based on client request. Post can handle more characters that can carry to server is very less or limited. This does not append client request data to URL. These requests cannot be cached. These don't remain in browsing history. Next one, using cookies. A cookie is a small piece of data stored on the client side, which a server uses when communicating with the clients. The cookie is stored in the user browser. The client sends this cookie back to the server for all the subsequent requests until the cookie is valid. The servlet container checks the request header for cookies and get the session information from the cookie and use the associated session from the server memory. Next, types of cookies. We can classify the cookie based on their expiry time, session, and persistence. Uh, First one, session cookies. Session cookies don't have expiration time. It lives in the browser memory. As soon as the web browser is closed, this cookie gets destroyed. Next, persistent cookies. Unlike the session cookies, they have expiration time. They are stored in the user hard drive and gets destroyed based on the expiry time. Next, how to send the cookies to the client. Create cookie object, set the maximum age, place the cookies in the HTTP response header. Next, methods of cookie class. Public void set command, public string get command, public void set max age, public string get name, public void set value, public get string get value. Next, we move to session tracking. Session tracking tracks the user's request and maintain their state. It is a mechanism used to store information on specific users and in order to recognize these users' request when they connect to the web server. HTTP is a stateless protocol where each request to the server is treated like a new request. However, there are ways to maintain the data for a particular usage in order to get served the specific content. There are several ways to track user session, including cookies, URL rewriting, and hidden form fields.